life, living and making a living can sometimes wear you out, grind you down, and dull your senses. So, for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that will give you a better chance of success and happiness, take this time out to sharpen your axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Vern Moses. Welcome to another in our series of ongoing verbal essays brought to you in this television format. Vern, over the past year, we've discussed selling on a couple of different shows. We've talked about that fear that we feel when we first approach the sales field, driving around in the car all day long, not even being able to stop and make a presentation. And we talked about some ways to get over that fear, to actually get in and to make an effort. But I know as a salesperson myself, and the question that is on many people's mind is, you get in, you make the effort, you make the presentation. How do you finalize the deal? How do you actually make the sale so it makes all that preparation and effort worthwhile?
Yeah, typically the term is closing the sale.
Yes.
I've always been uncomfortable with that because it seems like something that happens at the end, where, like from the very beginning, I had sales trainers and managers say, well, look, you got to close early. You got to close often. You got to close late. You got to close the number of times people say no, plus one. You know, that kind of stuff. And I, always a little discomforted by that. And I thought it's really not a close, it's an opening. Because, once the sale is made, that person's life is supposed to move on and be enriched and enhanced in some way, and certainly mine should be rewarded for my effort. So closing never seemed like a very good phrase, and over the years I kind of moved back to the point where I call it persuasive finalizing. I was wrapping it up, getting it done for the sake of everybody involved. And so there's a little bit different languaging, a little bit different perspective when I start talking about closing sales.
Well, also many people, salespeople, are in a profession where they're doing repeat business with clients, and so definitely in that arena you'd want to create an opening, a porthole through which you could do future business, more business, bigger business, better business.
Exactly. One of the things, when they say close early, close often, close late, and yet the other language seemed to conflict with that. It was something that happened at the end with the presenting of a contract or whatever. And so I had to come up with a definition for closing, because it was important to have the right definition. I know one definition that I captured very early in my sales career was Charles Roth in his great book, Secrets of Closing Sales. He said that a salesperson that doesn't close sales is not a salesperson. He's a conversationalist. Nice old boy, out entertaining people and having great visits, but he's not a salesperson. You got to get the job done for the sake of everybody. And so closing was important, but then again we had to re-identify it. And so there was a point in there where I determined a definition of a close. And it was something that a salesperson does, which could include, by the way, not doing anything. I mean, that's doing something. If you purposely not doing anything.
Making a decision.
Exactly. But it's something that a salesperson does that a prospect has to keep a person from doing, has to stop it, in order to avoid progressing toward a sale. In other words, in truth, that makes the knock on the door, the dialing of a phone, or the walking through an office door a close. So in other words, that's something that a salesperson does that the prospect has to keep them from doing. For example, if they don't answer the phone, the call is over. Or if they don't answer the door, the call is over. If they don't receive you in the office, the call is over. But if they do, if they say yes, and you say hi, and they say hi, that's movement. So that's the idea. Now we begin to keep the call alive. If you say, I'm sorry to trouble you this morning, if I have, and they say, well, it's okay, I was wondering if you could do me a favor, so long as it doesn't cost you any money. That's a close. So everything that you do to keep that call alive and keep it moving can be considered a close. However, none of it works. None of it works if you don't have a prospect.
Right.
So you can be the strongest closer in the world, and if you don't have a prospect, as we defined it here the last couple, 3 weeks ago, then you're wasting your time, and you're impinging upon that person's time. And I think that's a consideration that we have to have if we're going to be really professional. So it's kind of like getting into it and really discussing it. And as we go on, and by the way, I'm fully intending to maybe do 1, 2, 3, or 4 shows on this, because it's such fun. I think it's probably the most pleasurable moments of my life in the closing process. And yet I haven't had to do a whole lot of it, because if the presentation is presented in a way to embrace and to enrich that person and to fill a gap in their life, they're fairly quick to buy, fairly quick to buy. A lot of times I think the time and the effort and the energy that we spend into learning how to close, studying closes, going to seminars on closes, is in secret an avoidance of prospecting. Somehow I think we feel that if we get really good at closing, we don't have to prospect as much. And that's not true. I mean, that's what that's about. But closing can be essential, and I think it's important. I think, too, we have to set this thing up in such a way. There are certain things we have to honor if we're going to be persuasive in any facet of our life. That includes mom influencing their children, or a woman, her spouse, or whatever it happens to be. That in order to set the stage, there's a 4-step process. And I don't mean to be too basic here, because we've got some salespeople watching, I know. But sometimes it doesn't hurt to review this. There's an opera called Aida.
Yes.
I bet you've heard of it. AIDA?
Yes.
Okay. And really what that means is that in order to be persuasive, to influence someone, to do what you want them to do, buy what you have for them to buy, you're going to have to get their attention. In other words, every mind is busy surviving. Every mind is occupied at something that's going on in their life. And a salesman comes bopping along, or a saleswoman, and if you can't divert that thought pattern, if you can't get their attention, you're wasting your time. And frankly, you can be a real imposition. And if you can't capture the attention, you should move on rather than trying to proceed. If salespeople make a mistake out here in the field, I think it's trying to scoot through all these steps, irrespective of reality. In other words, they just kind of want to get it all in so they can make their sale and go on to the next one.
You're going to sit here until I'm done with my presentation.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether you want to or not.
It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
I know I can't imagine how many times that I've been in a home and I've done a lot of direct-to-the-home selling, to me, which is really creative direct selling. When you knock on a door and they've never heard of your product, never saw you, have no idea where you're from, and you walk out of there an hour later with anywhere from $100 to $3,000. You know what I mean? From $100 to $3,000 of their money or a signed contract, that's salesmanship.
Right.
And I call it creative because there was nothing there, and direct because you're right there with the consumer. And frankly, it's the most exciting and rewarding kind of selling because frankly, you don't have to spend any time with people you don't want to spend time with. I mean, you're always in command of that, and I like that part of it. And you got a huge retail store. And you can go out there and open that door any way you want to. You know, it's really kind of fascinating. But you got to get their attention. And I've had people say, well, you know, like a woman's doing her ironing, for example, and says, well, you go ahead and explain it to me, and I'll just do my ironing. And I just wouldn't do that. I'd say, no, if the ironing is important to you, I respect that, and if you'll excuse me while I'll dash on my way and perhaps come back another day. I just wouldn't proceed. The televisions is an interesting thing.
That's a real tough one.
Yeah, in other words, and I have no difficulty at all. I have several ways of managing that. One is to talk real low so they can't hear you, so they become conscious of the television. See, a lot of people aren't even conscious of it. It's part of their existence, their environment.
Right.
And so, but you talk real low and you can't get through. And other times I will say, oh, by the way, it's really hard to compete with that. Do you mind if I turn it down? You know, and they say, oh, no. I mean, usually I've never had them say, no, I don't want you to turn it down. And so I'll go over and I'll turn it down too far. You know, I mean, it's kind of presumptuous, but I'll turn it off and I'll go, whoops. You know, and they'll say, oh, it's okay. And I leave it. I mean, it's amazing the authority that you can have if you exercise it. And I've never had anyone get offended. Now, someone watching say, well, you do that at my house and I'll throw you out. No, maybe so. Probably wouldn't be in your house. I mean, it's just, that's the way it is out here. But you got to get people's attention. What that means is kind of focused on what you're talking about. Once you get their attention, you have another task at hand. You know the second one, of course? The I stands for, you got to get their interest in what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
So you got to get their attention diverted to you, and then you got to begin to develop interest in what you're talking about. If you can't do that, you really need to move on. You need to move on. Because if there's interest in what you're talking about, if you can fill a need, okay, enrich a life, then there will be a desire for the product. People like to buy. If it makes sense, and if they can better themselves in some way, there's a desire for that product or service. And when the desire is there, a natural consequence is action. Because they're going to go ahead and, do business with you. To play with this is dangerous. I mean, you start messing around with this, like get to the action too quick or skip over interest because you figure the attention is strong enough and I'll just go straight for the desire, you can get yourself in trouble because it's kind of like baseball. This is first, second, third, and fourth base. It's kind of like, in baseball, you can have the bases are loaded. There can be 2 outs, last of the ninth, and the count's 3-2. I mean, the ultimate baseball scenario, okay? And your batter can take that. I mean, when that ball is pitched, everybody's running. I don't know if you know the game or not, but everybody's running because you might as well. And so that hitter hits that ball, and it begins to rise, and it's going, okay? And it goes over the fence, all right? And say the score is, we'll say, 3-0, okay? And you've got the tying runs on base, and the winning run is that hitter, okay? As everybody, they come across first, and the guy on second scores, whatever, and so he goes to first and second, and as he's moving around second, he just barely misses the bag, okay? And the umpire notices and waits for someone to mention it, okay? Well, the second baseman happened to notice. He goes all the way around, and he gets home, and the second baseman says to the umpire, he didn't hit the bag, and and so they throw the ball to him, and they touch it, and he's out. I mean, he did not win the game. It's the same thing here, that if you miss one of these, no matter how close you might get to it, you could jeopardize the ending of it. And so this has to be a consciousness that you're into. And then, of course, you have to have the prospect to talk to. Remember, the prospect is someone who has the ability and the authority and the need or perceived need for the product, and you got to be seeing them at the appropriate time. Now, I'm talking about ideal, and the only time you can run into this on a regular basis is a willingness to what? To prospect. To talk to lots of people every day and be real nice and offer good service. That's the process. And when you're in that and you've gone through this, now you're in pretty good shape. I've got a startling thing to say about closing. It's almost unfair. It's almost unfair to expect the individual, the prospect, to make the decision. People don't do that well. I know a lot of people, I bet you do too, who some of the major decisions they have to make on a day-to-day basis is whether or not to have peas or corn with dinner on Tuesday night. You know what I mean? They live in a formulated world.
Yes.
They go to work the same way and meet the same people and what have you. And so decision-making is difficult because there's a fear of making a mistake. And
Well, they've been told all their lives what to do next, how to do it, when to do it, and what's appropriate.
And so what our job is to do as a salesperson is to assist people in thinking, evaluating, and in making the decision. In order to do that, I found the most powerful thing that I can do is to correlate that person with my product and with ourselves. To see if there's a match here. Are they relinquishing some of their authority to me as an authority, or are they taking full authority, which is 100% okay? Because if they're authoritative, that means they're decisive. And so either way, but I got to know what's going on. Is there a perceived need for the product or service? Can they really benefit? Now, does it correlate? See, the common term is qualify. I've always thought that was kind of presumptuous, to qualify a person. I rather correlate them. I mean, there's a little bit of different attitude there. Now, once all that happens, then as a salesperson, I make the decision. I make the decision that they've bought. And now, all they're left with is to allow that or to disallow it. Now, if they adopt me, and if they see the fulfillment in the product, then they're going to allow it. It's easier to allow it, okay? And if they don't, that's okay. Follow what I'm saying? In other words, that to me is what happened. That is what I call the assumptive technique. You assume the sale made in advance,
Yes.
and then you change your tenses. See, I've done a lot of coaching and counseling on salespeople and recorded their efforts. And I've never recorded a sales presentation, whether it was live, real, okay, real time, or if it was done as a role play, that did not in some way talk people out of buying, or at least out of buying right now. Every single sales call tends to do that. Isn't that fascinating?
Well, I think one of the reasons is we do more talking and not enough listening.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're trying to get someone's interest and pique their desire, we need to find out what their needs or what they perceive their needs to be. And I think a lot of times we try to tell them what we think they need, what we think they should have, instead of finding what it is what they think they need or should have.
Well, there's an interesting thing there. There is a trend in selling today that's kind of emerged that says that it's investigative selling. You ask a lot of questions, find the need, and then fill it. Well, my experience is in creative direct selling that a lot of people don't have a need. How could you possibly need something or want something that you don't know exists? You know what I'm saying?
So there's an education.
Yeah, and so there you indeed are going in to persuade. And there's the dog and pony show, the presentation, the drama of the whole thing. And that's the kind of selling, frankly, that I preferred over the years, when there was no market. And I had to go there and create it from scratch. Now, to me, if I'm calling on a person who buys buttons, I knew a button salesman once, and I was a little suspicious of that. And I don't discount button salesmen, but who are they calling on? People who buy buttons.
Right.
The guy wants to buy some buttons, and depending on what buttons he buys, depends upon what buttons you have. And so it's really not a sales job as much as like a service condition. If a man's going to buy electronic parts, he's building a machine or whatever, and he's going to have those parts, then it's a matter of choosing who he's going to buy it from, but he is going to buy.
Absolutely.
So it's not so much salesmanship as it is educating, making them aware of your product and service and how it's better and what have you. And so there you're really selling yourself and your process, whatever it happens to be. So that's a different kind of selling too. But when you go in and there's no market, then you're really starting from scratch. And so what I'm saying is that one of the reasons that talking people out of buying or out of buying now is their languaging. In other words, for example, when I say, if you buy this product, and it slips in there real easy, I'm giving them permission to not buy it. I'm really kind of opening the door, okay? Or if I say, when you buy this product, I'm giving them permission not to do it now, okay? But if I put it in a past tense, and I say, as an owner of this product, or having purchased this product, you're going to find that. See, now I'm talking in past tense, and it's a much stronger assumption, and there's almost a telesthesic process that takes place in the mind where they begin to actually take possession, and you're talking in past tense. It's kind of like what I tell people. Like if I was selling, pick a product, or say my seminars.
Okay.
And your mom, paid for the whole series. She said, I want Gina to have that experience, and so here's a check. Okay, now all I want you to do is go explain to her what it is that she's got. Would I talk to you differently than I otherwise might have? I think so. Yes. Because the job's been done.
Right.
There's no selling to do. Now it's just kind of like a service call almost, okay? And so I'm going to talk in a different tense, using a different framework for my communication. And that's the one that should be used in normal presentation. Okay, it's a different perspective. See, Charles Roth in his book, Secrets of Closing Sales, talked about 6 or 7 basic techniques of persuasion. And the first one, of course, that he talked about was the assumptive technique. Now, I remember years ago when I first started, the assumptive technique was manifested by someone saying that when you're through, assume the sale, pull out the contract, and just start writing, showing what it looks like on paper. And Gina, every time I did that, someone would say, what are you doing?
It makes them very nervous.
Yeah, and I'm just showing you what it looks like on paper, but it was downhill all the way after that. Right. It was too late to do that. So the assumption should occur early. In fact, before you actually start the presentation. The assumption is done, okay, and that's the way it is. But the assumptive technique is very, very powerful, there's no question. He also talked about, as a persuasive technique, questions, using questions. There's the open-ended question, the open and closed, subordinate questions. For example, if someone says, can I get this in green? If you say, well, yes, we could provide it in green, you may have just lost the sale. It's fascinating. But if you say, well, why do you ask? I mean, would you like it in green? And then they say, well, yes, I would, as a matter of fact, and you move forward with the sale. See, the subordinate question, answering a question with a question. I remember they asked this old professional salesman one time, why do you always, answer a question with questions? And he said, well, why not? Anyway, yeah, a lot of questions. But subordinate choice questions, and oftentimes giving them up to 3, but no more than 3. In other words, even 2 may be too obvious. But if you give them a choice of 3 and determine which one they like the least, they're closer to selecting from the other 2.
Right.
See what I'm saying? And so that kind of thing. Then, of course, there is the narratives, the telling of a story. Now, Gina, I'm going to kind of list these, and then in the next few moments, in the next hour or so, the next 2 or 3 shows, I'm going to go through some closes that I've used and that I've seen in the sales field that are so powerful because they use 2 or 3 or 4 of these methods in one close. Yeah. I mean, you talk about power. In boxing, they talk about combination punching and what have you. Well, if you come up with a close that uses maybe 4 or 5 techniques out of 7, this is a pretty powerful thing to do. And that's some of the things that we'll be talking about. Assumptive technique, questions, narratives, telling a good story, involving them emotionally, and not being afraid to be ethereal and aesthetic, and telling a good story, and that's a lot of fun.
Entertaining them.
Yeah, and then there's the impending events. In other words, this is a good way of moving people forward. Impending events. Impending event might be the prices are going up. Only if it's true, though. I had a man tell me years ago, and I believe this with all my heart and soul, that people can tell the difference between a ring of the heart and the rattle of the throat. In other words, if you start talking about prices going up and they're not going to go up, you might get invited to leave. I mean, people sense it. But indeed, if those prices are going up and you convey that appropriately, it's an impending event that causes people to act now instead of waiting. Okay? An impending event actually is something good that's going to happen if you buy, and something bad that might happen if you don't. You know what I mean? If you can kind of get those things going, that can work. Inducements are more fun than you can shake a stick at. I've had more fun with inducements, and I'll tell you some stories about that.
Great.
It's the extra premium, it's that extra little bit they're going to get if they do business now instead of later, and this is powerful. And it doesn't matter when you use it. Do you think there's any magazines sold in this country? I mean, big business. And these kids out selling magazines, and what's the first thing they say when you open that door? Hi, I'm in a contest.
Right, always.
Oh, and it works for them. And contest closes are incredibly powerful at the end of a call. And I'll explain how we can get some real mileage out of that. There's inducements. Physical action. Things that you do, physical things that you do that just involve people. And this is incredibly powerful. And this, of course, includes, writing a contract and things like that. But there's much, much more to come. But physical actions. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 7th one is so obvious, and yet so few salespeople actually do it, and that's ask them to buy. Just ask them.
That seems to be a tough one for people.
I know. It's just crazy. I mean, just ask them to buy.
Yeah.
Now, I've strengthened that. Ask them to, I'm going to put buy over here. Ask them to buy. That's normally what we hear. What I have reached is a point where I ask them to not buy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And how do you do that?
Well, I just say, based on what I've showed you today and your response and how it applies to you and what have you, I would say this: please don't say no. And I've closed more deals just by asking them to not buy. I mean, that's what I'm doing. It's much more powerful
Very
than just
humble.
asking them. Yeah. Please don't say no. And we've had a lot of fun with that. Ask them to not buy. And we'll go back over these things, and like I say, give a lot of illustrations. I was trying to think, I think we might have time for one. It was in 1959. At that time, I happened to be selling Cutco. That was my first sales experience, and it was extraordinary. I learned so much about myself and about people in those 5 years. But I made a call. Well, actually, I went to a banquet one day. It was a Cutco banquet, and they served this salad that was absolutely awesome. Beautiful thing. And I said, who in the world made this? And they said, well, a fellow by the name of Lester Knowles. I said, what does he use? What kind of tools? And he said, he just uses a chef knife. I said, could I meet him? I'd like to meet him. Because I thought in my mind, if I could show him my stuff and get his opinion, that would be great. So they led me back, and he's a big, muscular guy with tattoos and what have you, like Lester Knowles. And I asked him if he would take a peek at my product sometime, and he said, sure. And so I went by his house, and I had a couple trainees with me that night. And I went in, and as we were establishing rapport and what have you, he noticed my socks. I had Argyles on. Didn't know any better, Gina. You know what I mean? I just didn't know any better. But he really liked those socks. He was just a down-home country guy, and he said, boy, those are good-looking socks. And I said, thanks, my mom gave them to me. And he said, I sure like to have a pair of socks like that. He's kind of teasing me. So we went on. I put on the call. He fell in love with the cutlery. And I couldn't get him to buy. And I threw in a set of kitchen tools, and he wouldn't budge. And I threw in a barbecue set, and that didn't move him. And I threw in a hunting knife, beautiful hunting knife. And he said, boys, you're a kick, he says. You'd give me the shirt right off your back to make a sale, wouldn't you? And I said, no, Lester, I wouldn't give you my shirt. And I kind of went like that, and I raised my pant leg a little bit. And he said, you're kidding. And I said, no. He said, you got a deal. You understand? I took off my socks that night, and he went to the kitchen, got a coffee can, Gina, and paid cash.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Now, the trainees, when we got out in the car, I said, I can't do that. You know what I mean? I said, no, you don't have to do that on every call. You don't have to keep trading your socks. Now, I washed them. I insisted on washing them before I left them, but I made the deal. And what would that be? It's certainly, it's inducement. It's physical action. And I wanted the sale. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, that's the kind of thing that we'll be talking about. And we're going to have a lot of fun with this before we're through.
I'm looking forward to it, Bern.
I want to thank everybody for watching. Give us a call at 800-661-3490, and we'll send you a ticket to a live event. And we'll appreciate your comments about the show. In the meantime, my name is Bern.
Moses.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Bern.
And we'll look forward to the next time. We're going to have a good time.